Whisper Diaries. It's Alice here, and tonight I'm whispering about something we've all encountered but rarely discuss openly. Those simmering moments of attraction that develop within the structured confines of our professional lives. You know what I'm talking about. That unexpected chemistry with a colleague that catches you completely off guard. The kind of connection that develops gradually through shared projects, late nights at the office, and the particular intimacy that comes from working closely with someone day after day. The attraction that must be carefully managed, creating a tension all its own. So settle in, perhaps dim your lights, and let me share some stories about those moments when the professional becomes decidedly personal and work becomes the backdrop for something far more compelling than career advancement. Let's start with the story I'm calling The Late Night Project, which comes from my friend Elena. Like many stories of workplace attraction, this one begins with something that looks remarkably like its opposite, genuine dislike. Elena and Marcus had been rivals since they joined their advertising agency on the same day 2 years earlier. Their competition was the stuff of office legend. They consistently produced the best work in the agency, but their approaches were dramatically different. Eleanor was methodical, research-driven, and meticulous. Marcus was intuitive, creative, and somewhat chaotic in his process. What they shared was ambition and a determination to outshine the other at every opportunity. Their creative director seemed to take particular pleasure in pitting them against each other, often assigning them competing versions of the same project. The unspoken understanding was that the winner would be in line for the upcoming senior position. While their rivalry remained outwardly professional, there was an unmistakable edge to their interactions, a tension that everyone in the office could feel. The situation came to a head when their largest client requested a complete campaign overhaul due to a last-minute product change. The deadline was impossible, just 72 hours to completely reimagine a strategy that had been months in development. "I need both of you on this," their creative director announced. "Not competing versions. One cohesive campaign, combining both your strengths. The client meeting is Monday morning at 9 a.m. Don't let me down." Elena and Marcus exchanged glances that communicated mutual dismay. They'd never truly collaborated before, having carefully maintained their competitive distance. The first day was tense, with stilted communication and careful professional courtesy masking their discomfort at having to genuinely work together. By the second evening, with the deadline looming and progress moving too slowly, they found themselves alone in the office at 10 p.m, the only two people dedicated, or perhaps stubborn, enough to stay. "This isn't working," Marcus said finally, running his hands through his already dishevelled hair. "We're thinking too much about our usual processes and not enough about what this campaign actually needs." Elena looked up from her meticulously organised notes, surprised by his candour. "What do you suggest? A reset? Let's get out of this office. There's a diner around the corner that's open all night. Let's grab food, bring our laptops, and try to find some middle ground." The change of setting shifted something in their dynamic, away from the watchful eyes of colleagues in the final booth of a nearly empty diner at 11 p.m. Their professional armour began to crack. Over coffee that grew progressively stronger as the night wore on, they found themselves actually listening to each other's ideas rather than automatically looking for flaws. "I've always wondered," Eleanor said during a brief break from brainstorming, "why did you choose advertising? You could have gone into pure creative fields with your portfolio. The Honestly, I like the constraints. Having to be creative within specific parameters is like solving a puzzle. He looked at her with genuine curiosity. What about you? Your market analysis skills could have taken you into strategy or consulting. I love the moment when data reveals an unexpected insight about human behaviour, she admitted. When numbers tell a story that creative can bring to life, that's the magic for me. For the first time in 2 years of working together, they were seeing each other as individuals with passion for their work rather than obstacles to their advancement. As their conversation deepened, Eleanor found herself noticing things she'd been too competitive to see before. The thoughtfulness behind Marcus's seemingly impulsive ideas, the genuine excitement that animated his features when discussing concepts he believed in, the surprising depth of his market understanding beneath his creative intuition. As the night progressed, their work found a natural rhythm. Eleanor's methodical approach providing structure for Marcus's creative insights. Their campaign began taking shape in a way that was stronger than either could have produced alone. By 3 a.m, they had the bones of something remarkable, but exhaustion was setting in. When Elena stifled her third yawn in 5 minutes, Marcus insisted on calling it a night. We've got a solid foundation. Let's get a few hours of sleep and meet early tomorrow to finish, he suggested, closing his laptop. Outside the diner, the city was quiet, streets empty in those strange hours between late night and early morning. When Marcus offered to share a rideshare to her apartment, Eleanor accepted, too tired to consider alternatives. In the back seat of the car, the silence between them felt different than their usual tense avoidance. Eleanor found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her. The faint scent of his cologne mixed with coffee, the way he absently tapped his fingers against his knee when thinking, the profile of his face illuminated by passing streetlights. When the car stopped at her building, she hesitated before getting out. This project is not what I expected, she admitted. Working together, you mean? Marcus asked, his voice slightly lower than usual. Yes, it's actually been good. The admission felt more vulnerable than she'd intended. His smile in response made something flutter unexpectedly in her chest. See you tomorrow, Eleanor. The final day of their project passed in a blur of productivity and newfound collaboration. They still challenged each other, but the edge of competition had transformed into something more like mutual respect, each pushing the other toward excellence rather than trying to undermine them. When they finally presented their campaign Monday morning, it was with a unified front that surprised everyone in the meeting, most of all their creative director. The client approved their concept immediately, with compliments that would typically have been cause for individual pride, but now felt like shared victory. As they packed up after the presentation, their creative director commented, "Whatever you two figured out over the weekend, keep it up. That's the best work I've seen from either of you." When the office emptied for lunch, Marcus approached Eleanor's desk. "I was thinking," he said, showing unusual hesitation, "maybe we could continue our discussion from the diner, over dinner this time, not at 3 a.m. Elena felt a smile forming. "Are you asking me out?" "I'm suggesting we explore if our unexpected compatibility extends beyond work projects," he clarified, the confidence she was familiar with returning to his expression. "I think that's research worth conducting," she agreed, surprised by how much she meant it. What began as professional rivalry evolved into something far more interesting. A connection built on finally seeing the person behind the professional competitor. Sometimes the strongest attractions develop precisely where is the business strip, which explores that distinctive tension that can develop when professional boundaries are temporarily suspended by circumstance. My college friend Olivia had been working as an associate editor at a prestigious publishing house for just over a year when she was assigned to accompany Richard, the senior editor, on a business trip to a literary conference in Chicago. At 42, Richard was something of a legend in publishing circles. Brilliant, demanding, and known for his unerring instinct for potential bestsellers. Olivia, at 28, had been quietly learning from him since joining the company, admiring his editorial precision from a respectful distance. Their professional relationship was cordial but formal. He was her superior, and the 14-year age gap and hierarchical difference meant their interactions remained strictly business. This 3-day conference started smoothly enough. They attended different sessions during the day, meeting briefly to compare notes over coffee between panels. Olivia was conscious of representing the publishing house properly, maintaining professional composure despite her genuine excitement about meeting authors she admired. On the second evening, severe thunderstorms moved into the area, causing widespread flight cancellations, including their scheduled return flight the following afternoon. As other conference attendees scrambled to make alternative arrangements, Richard calmly handled rebooking their flights for the following day and extending their hotel reservation. "There's a slight complication," he informed Olivia as they stood in the hotel lobby. "They only have one room available for tonight, a suite with 2 bedrooms. I've confirmed there's a proper separation between the rooms, but if you're uncomfortable, I can try to find alternative accommodation." "That should be fine," Olivia assured him, professional enough not to make an issue of the arrangement, while privately acknowledging a flutter of nervousness at the more personal proximity. The suite was spacious enough, with a shared living area between 2 separate bedrooms. After settling in, Richard suggested they use the unexpected extra time to review manuscripts they'd brought along. "We might as well make productive use of being stranded," he noted, removing his suit jacket and loosening his tie in a way Olivia had never seen at the office. They settled in the living area, manuscripts spread across the coffee table between them, the formality of their usual office interactions gradually softening in the more casual setting. When Richard ordered room service for dinner, the meal felt noticeably different from their professional lunches, more relaxed, the conversation extending beyond work to books they'd loved, authors who had influenced them, and their respective paths into publishing. "I never would have guessed you started in poetry," Olivia admitted, genuinely surprised by this glimpse of his background. "Most people don't know that about me," Richard acknowledged with a slight smile. "I keep my early literary aspirations fairly quiet." "Would I have read any of your work?" Olivia asked, emboldened by the unusual candour between them. "Not unless you have a particular fondness for obscure literary journals from the late 90s, he replied, a self-deprecating humour she'd never witnessed in the office. "I'd like to read them sometime," she said, surprising herself with her sincerity. The moment hung between them, personal rather than professional, crossing a boundary they'd both maintained carefully until now. Richard held her gaze a moment longer than usual before standing to clear their dinner dishes, breaking the brief tension. As the evening progressed and work gave way to more personal conversation, Olivia became increasingly aware of seeing a different side of Richard, not just the brilliant editor, but the man with his own history, regrets and passions for literature that matched her own. Without the hierarchical structure of the office surrounding them, she found herself noticing details she'd never allowed herself to observe before. The intensity in his eyes when discussing books he loved, the surprisingly gentle way he listened when she spoke, the subtle humour that never emerged in professional settings. When a particularly loud thunderclap rattled the windows, briefly cutting the hotel's power, Olivia jumped slightly. The emergency lights clicked on almost immediately, but in that brief moment of darkness, she felt Richard's hand steady her arm, a reflexive gesture of reassurance that sent an unexpected current through her. "Sorry," he said, withdrawing his hand when the lights returned. "Instinct." "It's fine," she replied, though they both seemed aware of a shift in the atmosphere between them, of crossing into territory that couldn't be easily recategorized as purely professional. As midnight approached, Richard suggested they should probably get some rest before their rescheduled flight. Standing in the doorway of her bedroom, Olivia hesitated. "Thank you," she said, "for treating me like a colleague today, not just a junior editor." "You've earned that respect," he replied, maintaining a careful distance between them in the doorway. "Your insight into the Morrow manuscript was spot on, something I missed entirely." The compliment, delivered without the usual professional buffer, felt surprisingly intimate. In the soft lighting of the suite, the usual boundaries between them seemed increasingly permeable. "Good night, Richard," she said finally. The use of his first name, something she rarely did at the office, marking the shift in their dynamic. "Good night, Olivia," he replied, something in his voice suggesting he was equally aware of the change between them. The following morning brought a return to more professional behaviour, though an undercurrent remained. Small glances, a new awareness that couldn't be completely dismissed. On the flight home, they sat side by side, their conversation ostensibly about work, but charged with new understanding. Before parting ways at the airport, Richard paused. "I'd like to discuss your career path more thoroughly," he said, "perhaps over dinner sometime, away from office interruptions." They both recognised the suggestion for what it was, an acknowledgement of what had developed between them, and an opportunity to explore it outside the confines of their professional roles. "I'd like that," Olivia replied, accepting the subtle shift from mentor and protégé to something with potential beyond professional development. What began as an unexpected extension of a business trip evolved into a careful exploration of connection outside hierarchical boundaries. 6 months later, Richard transferred to a different department to remove the direct reporting relationship, allowing their relationship to develop without professional complications. Sometimes the strongest connections form when circumstances temporarily suspend the structures that keep us in carefully defined roles, revealing the potential for something more meaningful. Our final story tonight is The Office Transfer, which explores how organisational changes can finally create space for feelings that have been carefully contained. My neighbour Sophia had spent 2 years maintaining a careful professional distance from Daniel. Working in the same law firm, but different departments, meant their paths crossed regularly, casually exchanging greetings in the break room, occasionally collaborating on cases that required both their specialties, and attending the same firm-wide functions with collegial politeness. What no one at the firm suspected was how deliberately Sophia managed these interactions, how consciously she limited their duration and maintained professional topics, because from her first week at the firm, she had felt an immediate and powerful attraction to Daniel that she'd determined to ignore completely. There were multiple rational reasons for her decision. Office relationships were discouraged, though not explicitly prohibited. Daniel was on partnership track, while she was still establishing her reputation. Most importantly, she had joined the firm after ending a relationship that had begun in her previous previous workplace, a painful experience that had eventually necessitated her leaving that position when the relationship ended. Never again, she had promised herself. Work is for work, not for finding relationships. So, for 2 years, she had perfected the art of friendly professional distance. She could now participate in case discussions with Daniel without being distracted by the way his brow furrowed slightly when considering complex arguments. She could exchange pleasant small talk at company events without lingering on his surprisingly genuine laugh, so different from the polished professional demeanour he maintained with clients. She had mastered the ability to focus on his legal insights rather than noticing how his hands moved expressively when explaining complicated concepts. This carefully maintained equilibrium was disrupted when the firm announced a departmental reorganisation. Sophia's specialised expertise was being moved to Daniel's department, placing them on the same team with regular collaboration now inevitable. Their first official meeting as colleagues rather than casual acquaintances was determinedly professional. Daniel welcomed her to the department with the same courtesy he showed everyone, introducing her to team procedures and current cases without any indication that their previous limited interactions had registered particularly with him. Sophia told herself this was for the best. Clearly her attraction had been one-sided, making it easier to maintain professional boundaries. Yet, as they began working closely together, she found her carefully constructed defences increasingly difficult to maintain. The problem wasn't that Daniel was inappropriate in any way. Quite the opposite. He was unfailingly professional, genuinely respectful of her expertise, and immediately incorporated her perspectives into team strategies. The difficulty was seeing him daily in situations that revealed dimensions of him she hadn't been exposed to before. She discovered his patience when mentoring junior associates, his subtle humour during tense negotiations, and his willingness to acknowledge when her approach to a problem was superior to his initial strategy. Each new insight made him more compelling, more difficult to keep categorised as simply colleague. 3 weeks after her department transfer, they found themselves working late, preparing for a major case. The office had emptied hours earlier, leaving them alone with case files spread across the conference room table and take-out containers pushed to one side. "We should probably call it a night," Daniel suggested, noticing Sophia stifling a yawn. "We can pick this up tomorrow." As they packed their materials, he asked casually, "Can I ask you something that's been puzzling me?" "Of course," Sophia replied, keeping her tone neutral despite sudden nervousness. "Before you transferred to this department, I always had the impression you were avoiding me," he said, his directness surprising her. "Was there something I did that bothered you?" The question caught Sophia completely off guard. She'd thought her careful distance had appeared merely professional, not avoidant. "Not at all," she assured him quickly. "I just try to maintain clear boundaries between work and everything else." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense, though I have to admit, I was relieved when you transferred to our department. I've wanted to work with you more directly since that Maxwell case last year, when you completely restructured our approach." "You remember that?" Sophia asked, surprised he had noticed her contribution to a case where she'd been only tangentially involved. "Of course," he said simply. "You have a perspective that's different from anyone else in the firm. I notice things like that." Something in his tone suggested he might notice more than just her professional contributions. As they walked toward the elevator together, the late hour and empty office created a different atmosphere than their daytime interactions. More personal, less structured by organisational contexts. In the elevator, Daniel leaned against the mere wall, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him at work. Since we're now in the same department and will be working together regularly, I should probably tell you something. Sophia felt a flutter of nervousness. What's that? I've had a strict personal policy about not dating within my department, he said, his gaze direct, which is why I never acted on my interest when you were in different department. The candidity admission hung between them, transforming the small space of the elevator into something charged with new possibility. And now that I'm in your department, Sophia asked, her carefully maintained professional tone slipping. Now it's complicated, he acknowledged with a slight smile. But I'd like to figure it out if you're interested. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage, but neither moved immediately to exit. I've also had a policy about not dating colleagues, Sophia admitted, based on past experience. I understand, Daniel said, disappointment evident but accepting. I respect that completely. But, she continued, surprising herself, I'm beginning to think some policies deserve reconsideration when new evidence presents itself. His smile in response made the 2 years of careful distance seem suddenly worth questioning. As they walked to their respective cars, they agreed to discuss it further over dinner that weekend, away from the office, as individual people rather than colleagues. As I bring tonight's episode to a close, I hope these stories of workplace attraction have resonated with something in your own experience. Those moments when professional settings become the backdrop for unexpected connection, when the structured environment of work creates its own unique tension between what we feel and what we allow ourselves to express. Before we part ways tonight, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. I'd love if you'd rate this episode and leave a comment sharing your own experience with workplace chemistry. And please hit that bell icon to receive notifications whenever a new episode drops. You can also consider buying me a coffee as a small thank you for my work. Your engagement helps our whispered community grow and helps me create more content that speaks to your experiences. In our next episode, we'll explore new territories with fresh stories to both soothe and entice you. Got a relationship topic you're curious about? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one and love getting your suggestions. Thank you for listening to Whisper Diaries. This is Alice, your guide through the complex terrain of attraction that develops within professional boundaries, wishing you the wisdom to navigate those connections with both heart and responsibility. Until next time, sweet dreams, and may your own story unfold with just the right balance of restraint and possibility.